This is assignment 3.3 and I'm doing this on arousal, anxiety and stress. So first looking at arousal. Arousal is the intensity of behaviour to the degree of emotional energy that is felt in different situations. It has two branches, somatic or cognitive. Somatic relates to the changing state of the body. So, for example, the changes to the heart rate, blood pressure and breathing rate. Cognitive relates to the mind, so moment-to-moment changes in worry or negative thoughts. It is linked to the energized state that drives a person to learn or perform. Arousal can have a positive impact on sporting performance, but if there's too much arousal, then it can have a negative impact. So looking at the theories, the first theory is drive theory. The drive theory views the relation between arousal and performance as linear. The quality of the performance depends on how well the skill has been learned. When doing kick-ups in football, a more experienced individual like Messi would have a higher quality performance if they are highly aroused, unlike a cognitive individual such as a child learning how to swim would crack under pressure and not achieve their goals or unable to do the skill. With a cognitive learner, an increase in arousal will have a negative effect, whereas someone who is an autonomous learner will have a positive effect on increased arousal and performance. The dominant response is the motor program that is learned and will usually become evident when arousal is raised. This will benefit a skilled performer because their response will be fluent and technically correct. However, when we look at the criticisms, this theory suggests that high-level athletes will play a higher quality performance when highly aroused, but this doesn't explain why athletes fail in high aroused situation. An example is John Terry. He slipped during the penalties, which cost him the Champions League victory of his home team. We can suggest that he was too aroused and cracked under pressure, which argue against this theory as he was a highly professional athlete. If we look at the inverted U theory, this theory suggests that an increase in arousal will increase in the quality of performance, but if the individual is under-aroused or too aroused, then the performance will decrease. An under-aroused will have limited concentration attention, which will wander to unwanted cues, i.e. daydreaming. The process of selective attention wouldn't operate, and any information overload will lead to inaccurate decision making. So that is the first little bit on the graph. The optimal level, which is the middle part, or the threshold arousal, is the perfect state as potential performance is maximized due to the high concentration and the productivity of selective attention and taking important information. This is called cue utilization. This will allow accurate decision making. Being too aroused for an athlete will cause the field of attention to narrow excessively, which can lead to athletes missing cues. Hypervigilance is a state of near panic and level of nervousness. Situations which could make an individual too aroused would be the pressure of the event, anxiety, or level of experience. Factors such as level of experience, personality, and type of skill will attribute to this theory. A type B personality will cope with high aroused situation due to them having a lower levels of anxiety and will being more relaxed, whereas type A personality won't be able to cope with this amount of pressure. With putting in golf, the type B would suit that skill more due to the needing to have a fine and complex attention. Unlike type A would suit a skill like rugby tackle as they would need a gross and simple attention. Extroverted personality will perform better at a higher aroused level than introverted, as they get bored quickly but also able to cope with competition and distractions. When we look at the criticisms, it is very unlikely there to be a smooth decline in the performance as increased arousal if we look on the graph. It will be more likely that if we have a somatic and cognitive arousal are high, a sharp drop in performance. If we look at now, the next theory is the catastrophe theory. This theory suggests that performance is affected in the same approach to the inverted U theory, where it shows a proportional positive correlation between arousal and performance, but only when the individual has low levels of cognitive anxiety. If the individuals have a higher level of cognitive anxiety and the arousal increases to their threshold, then the individual will experience a catastrophic drop. It suggests that the drop in the performance will not be a steady decline if the levels of arousal become too high. However, when we look at these criticisms, there are examples when athletes have bounced right back to that optimum level. In the Rio Olympics 2016, when Mo Farah had fell over in the 10,000 metre run but still managed to win the gold, which can criticise this theory as he bounced back to the top. Another good example was Song Yang, who won the 1,500 metre swim at the London Olympics 2012, despite an initial false start that saw the races to restart. Now, when we move on to anxiety is a negative experience of stress and can be caused by worry or apprehensive. Anxiety would be caused by day-to-day situations. Athletes can get at anxiety such as injuries, training schedules, and concerns about the level of performance. Cognitive anxiety is the thought component of anxiety. It is associated with worry, apprehension, and the fear of negative evaluations of performance. Cognitive anxiety occurs hours before, have thoughts of doubts, concerned over ability to achieve the task, and worry. Somatic anxiety is a physical component and associated with the increases in heart rate and blood pressure. These are physical symptoms of increased arousal. Somatic anxiety is triggered by cognitive anxiety. Somatic anxiety happens just before the game event and involves physiological changes. There is also a second dimension relating to the stability of anxiety. The second dimension is trait anxiety. This is where it is a general disposition to perceive certain situations as threatening. Trait anxiety is part of personality and is relatively stable. This determines the degree of state anxiety that is experienced in any given situation. Having high trait anxiety means an individual is more likely to experience higher levels of anxiety. Where the second dimension is state anxiety. This is where it is their person's immediate condition of anxiety in any one situation. It is usually a temporary emotional response to a situation that is perceiving as threatening. An example is during cross-country riding. A rider can have low-level anxieties on a gallop track, but when they're coming up to a corner fence, their anxiety levels can increase as there is high chances of the horse refusing the jump, which can end up in the rider falling off, which is seen as threatening. Athletes can get competitive anxiety, which are affected by fear of failure, making mistakes, fear of evaluation, fear of crowd, fear of competition importance, fear of injury, danger, lack of control of the opposition, the referee, the pitch, the type of task involved. With any state anxiety during competition, some athletes may remain calm, whereas some can become very stressed out. If we look on the impact on performance, the SCAT is a test which measures and determines how much an individual anxiety gets during competition. These results are similarly linked to the state anxiety a performer feels before a competition. Linking to the types of anxiety, cognitive state anxiety increases as the competition approaches, although not just before the competition. High cognitive anxiety does not only lead to reduction in performance, but could lead to an extreme decline. The catastrophe model describes how cognitive arousal or anxiety debilitates performance once it moves past the individual's optimal level and reaches a specific threshold that results in a catastrophic decline in performance. Somatic state anxiety tends to low leading Somatic state anxiety tends to low leading up to competition, but increases shortly before the competition. When an athlete experiences anxiety, it determines how the individual handles it and how much it will affect the performance. The concentration of the individual will become decreased as there will be many thoughts going through their head which will negatively impact the performance, and therefore the mentality of the athlete will be affected by the anxiety. If we look at some of these anxiety managements, there are two types of anxiety management techniques. Somatic anxiety management relates to the physical symptoms, and cognitive anxiety management relates to the processes and feelings. You can manage anxiety by deep breaths, be confident, positive, practice, stay in control, where you only focus on the performance, warm up, and pay selective attention to relative cues. Even though these are accurate techniques, there are some criticisms with these management. These are difficult to apply in quick sporting situations. Individuals need to want to use the technique. Personality can affect anxiety management. Anxiety may cause problems with technical application, and some equipment not realistic to use in sports situations. Some more anxiety management techniques are imagery. This is where guided imagery for social anxiety involves the use of visualization techniques to help your body enter a relaxed state. An athlete living with performance anxiety can visualize a competition and feelings of relaxation rather than anxiety. Biofeedback is where the individual is taught how to properly respond to their anxiety, and it is one way he or she can manage to control it without the use of medications. Now on to stress. Stress is the psychological state produced by perceived physiological and psychological forces. According to Lazarus and Folkman, stress is a pattern of negative physiological states and psychological responses occurring in situations where people perceive threats to their well-being which they may not be able to meet. The combination of anxiety and arousal can lead to stressors. Some forms of stressors in sports are conflict, competition, and frustration. Stress is both positive and negative. It can delay a healthy lifestyle but also benefit an athlete. The curve shows that as the level of the stress increases, the performance level also increases to the point of eustress or healthy tension. Comfort zone on the graph indicates this range of stress levels that we can absolutely manage and felicitates good performance levels. When this stress becomes overwhelming, there is a point where the person becomes fatigued, which results in the performance quality starting to decline. A positive example is a basketball player shoots a three-pointer at a faster rate due to having the pressure of the opponents and audience increases the performance. There are two terms to explain stress for sports. There is eustress and de-stress. De-stress is the negative form of stress. It is the extreme form of anxiety, nervousness, apprehension or worry as a result of perceived inability to meet demands. An example of de-stress is getting a yellow card or not getting picked for the team. Eustress is a good form of stress that can give you a feeling of fulfillment. There are some athletes that seek out stressful situations as they like the challenge and pushing themselves. This can help them to increase their skill level and focus their attention. This benefits them due to increasing intrinsic motivation. One example is free solo climbing. This type of climbing involves climbing routes with no aids or protection. One mistake could lead to death.